Dr. Laura Carter stood in the dimly lit laboratory, her eyes fixed on the glass container holding the golden liquid that shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. It had taken years of research, countless late nights, and endless debates with her colleagues to reach this moment. The serum inside the vial was their greatest achievement yet, a breakthrough that promised to change the world. Or so they believed. Across the room, Dr. Alan Hughes adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the data on his tablet. He was a tall man with sharp features and an even sharper mind, though his methods often raised questions among the team. Still, no one could deny his brilliance or his determination to see the project succeed. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, glancing at Laura. His tone was calm, but carried an air of authority. Laura hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. She trusted the science behind the serum, but something about today felt different, unsettling, almost. This wasn't just another trial run. It was the first time they would test it on a human being. Until now, all experiments had been conducted on animals, and while the results were promising, humans were far more complex. Too many variables existed, too many unknowns. The subject chosen for the trial sat quietly in the adjacent holding cell. Ethan Moore, a man in his early 30s with dark hair and tired eyes, had been sentenced to life imprisonment for a crime he claimed he didn't commit. To him, participating in the experiment meant a chance at redemption, or at least a distraction from the monotony of prison life. He had agreed without hesitation, unaware of the true nature of what awaited him. "Let's begin," Dr. Hughes announced, breaking the silence. Two assistants entered the room, escorting Ethan to the testing chair. He moved slowly, his hands cuffed, but there was a strange calmness in his expression. Once seated, the restraints were tightened, securing him in place. A nurse approached with the syringe containing the serum, its golden hue catching the light. Ethan watched as the needle pierced his skin, delivering the liquid into his bloodstream. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then, a subtle shift occurred. His eyelids fluttered, and his breathing steadied. When he opened his eyes again, they seemed clearer, more focused. Dr. Hughes leaned forward, studying Ethan's face intently. "Respond to my command," he instructed firmly. "Stand up." Without hesitation, Ethan rose from the chair. His movements were smooth, precise, devoid of any resistance. The team exchanged glances, some smiling in relief, while others scribbled notes furiously. Laura, however, remained silent. She observed Ethan closely, searching for signs of distress or discomfort. But there were none, at least not yet. Over the next hour, the researchers put Ethan through a series of tasks designed to test his obedience and cognitive function. He followed every instruction flawlessly, whether it was solving puzzles, organizing objects, or even reciting sentences fed to him by the scientists. On paper, everything appeared perfect. Yet, deep down, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the session drew to a close, Dr. Hughes dismissed the assistants and turned to Laura. "This is it," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "We've done it. Imagine the possibilities. Crime rates plummeting, wars ending, society functioning like clockwork. All because of this." But Laura wasn't convinced. While the serum worked exactly as intended, she couldn't ignore the nagging thought that controlling someone's mind came at a cost, one they might not fully understand until it was too late. As she glanced at Ethan, who now sat silently in the corner, staring blankly ahead, she wondered if humanity itself might be the price they'd have to pay. The days following the initial trial passed quickly, but for Dr. Laura Carter, they felt like an eternity. Ethan Moore had been returned to his holding cell, where he remained under constant observation. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Too normal, in fact. Ethan followed every order given to him without question, ate his meals at the designated times, and even exercised when instructed. But as the hours turned into days, small cracks began to appear in what the team had assumed was perfection. It started subtly. During one of the routine evaluations, Ethan paused mid-sentence while answering a question. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if he were thinking deeply about something. When asked to continue, he complied immediately, but the hesitation lingered in Laura's mind. She replayed the moment over and over, wondering if she had imagined it, or if there was truly something unusual happening beneath the surface. Dr. Alan Hughes dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "The serum is working exactly as designed," he said confidently during their morning briefing. "Any delays you're observing are likely due to residual stress from his previous environment. Give it time, and he'll stabilize completely." But Laura wasn't so sure. That evening, she decided to review the data herself. Sitting alone in the lab, she pulled up Ethan's neural scans on her computer screen. What she found sent a chill down her spine. Certain areas of his brain, the parts responsible for critical thinking and decision-making, were showing increased activity, despite the serum's intended effect of suppressing those functions. It was as if his mind was fighting back, adapting to the chemical changes in ways they hadn't anticipated. Her unease grew the next day when Ethan exhibited another unexpected behavior. During a task requiring him to sort objects by color, he stopped halfway through and asked, "Why am I doing this?" The question caught everyone off guard. No subject had ever questioned their instructions before. Dr. Hughes stepped forward, his tone firm. "You're here to follow orders. Now continue." Ethan obeyed, but not before tilting his head slightly, as though considering the logic behind the command. Laura noticed the flicker of defiance in his eyes, however brief it was. Something inside her stirred, a mix of curiosity and fear. If Ethan could momentarily resist the serum's influence, what did that mean for the others? Meanwhile, additional subjects were introduced to the program. Emily Dawson, a young woman convicted of theft, joined the trials alongside Marcus Lee, a former soldier imprisoned for insubordination. Both showed similar results to Ethan at first: complete compliance. However, within days, anomalies began surfacing. Emily occasionally hummed tunes under her breath, seemingly unaware of her surroundings. Marcus, on the other hand, displayed bursts of physical strength during exercises, far exceeding his usual capabilities. Laura couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. The serum wasn't just controlling minds, it was altering them in unpredictable ways. Some subjects became eerily calm, almost robotic, while others developed heightened senses or emotions. One night, after observing Marcus sketch intricate designs on scrap paper, a skill he claimed he'd never possessed before, Laura confronted Dr. Hughes again. "This isn't stability," she argued, her voice low but urgent. "We're tampering with things we don't fully understand. These people aren't machines, they're human beings. Their minds are adapting, evolving, and we have no idea what the long-term effects will be." Hughes listened silently, his expression unreadable. Finally, he replied, "Every breakthrough comes with risks. We can't stop now, not when we're this close to success." But Laura knew better. As she left the lab that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing with fire, and sooner or later, it would burn them all. As the days went by, the changes in the subjects grew more pronounced. Ethan, Emily, and Marcus were no longer just following orders. They were starting to show signs of awareness that unsettled even the most confident members of the research team. Dr. Laura Carter spent long hours watching them, her notebook filled with observations she didn't dare share with Dr. Alan Hughes. Something was happening beneath the surface, something neither the serum nor its creators could fully control. One evening, after another round of tests, Emily surprised everyone. While being escorted back to her holding cell, she suddenly stopped walking. Her guard gently nudged her forward, but instead of obeying, she turned her head slightly and asked, "Where are we going?" It was a simple question, yet it sent ripples through the facility. Questions like that weren't supposed to happen, not from someone under the serum's influence. Laura watched the interaction closely. Emily's voice had been calm, almost curious, but there was a flicker of defiance in her eyes. When the guard repeated the instruction to keep moving, Emily complied. but not before glancing down at the floor as if deep in thought. Later that night, Laura reviewed the security footage of the incident. She noticed something odd. Emily's fingers had twitched ever so slightly during the exchange, as though trying to form words or gestures she couldn't quite express. The next day, Marcus displayed his own peculiar behavior. During a physical endurance test, he pushed himself far beyond what was expected of him. The researchers cheered at first, believing it to be proof of the serum enhancing human potential. But when Marcus collapsed afterward, panting heavily, he muttered something under his breath. One of the assistants leaned closer to hear him and froze. "We're not tools," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "You can't fix us." The room fell silent. No one knew how to respond. Dr. Hughes quickly dismissed the comment as a random glitch, insisting they focus on the positive outcomes. But Laura wasn't convinced. That night, unable to sleep, she decided to dig deeper into the experiment's records. Hidden away in a forgotten folder, she discovered logs detailing earlier trials. Trials that hadn't gone as smoothly as reported. Some subjects had experienced violent outbursts, while others sank into catatonic states. These cases had been quietly buried, marked as failures, and never mentioned again. Determined to learn more, Laura began sneaking around the facility during her breaks. She explored restricted areas, searching for clues about the true purpose of the project. In one locked office, she found files labeled Project Compliance. Inside were detailed plans outlining how the serum would eventually be used, not just on criminals, but on entire populations. The goal was clear: create a world where dissent was impossible, where every person acted according to the will of those in power. What shocked Laura most was a memo signed by Dr. Hughes himself. It described the subjects as expendable, mere stepping stones toward achieving global order. Reading those cold, calculated words made her stomach churn. She realized then that this wasn't about helping people, it was about control, plain and simple. Her discovery coincided with a bold move by Emily. Using a small piece of broken glass smuggled from the cafeteria, she managed to pick the lock on her cell door late one night. Moving silently through the darkened halls, she accessed a computer terminal in an empty lab. Though unfamiliar with technology, Emily somehow navigated the system and downloaded classified documents about the experiment. When she returned to her cell, she shared what she'd learned with Marcus, who listened intently. By morning, the two had hatched a plan. They wouldn't let themselves, or anyone else, be treated as experiments anymore. As Laura continued her secret investigation, she unknowingly aligned herself with their cause. Together, they formed the beginnings of a resistance, united by a shared desire for freedom. And though none of them knew what lay ahead, they were certain of one thing: the serum may have controlled their bodies, but it could never truly crush their spirits. Dr. Laura Carter's decision to join the resistance weighed heavily on her mind. She knew the risks. Betraying Dr. Alan Hughes, and the project could cost her everything: her career, her freedom, maybe even her life. But every time she looked into the eyes of Ethan, Emily, or Marcus, she saw fragments of their humanity fighting its way back. It reminded her why she had become a scientist in the first place: to help people, not to strip them of their dignity. Her alliance with the resistance gave her access to critical information that the others couldn't reach. Late at night, when most of the staff had gone home, Laura snuck into the main lab to retrieve classified documents detailing the serum's formula and long-term effects. Her hands trembled as she copied the files onto a small USB drive, knowing that discovery would mean immediate arrest. Still, she pressed on, driven by guilt and a growing sense of purpose. One evening, while reviewing the stolen data, Laura stumbled upon something alarming. The serum wasn't just designed to suppress violent tendencies. It was engineered to rewrite memories over time. Subjects exposed to prolonged doses began losing significant chunks of their past, replacing them with fabricated narratives implanted by the researchers. This revelation horrified her. The team wasn't merely controlling behavior. They were erasing identities, turning people into blank slates ready to be molded however those in power saw fit. Laura shared this information with Emily during one of their secret meetings. They met in an unused storage room, speaking in hushed tones so faint they barely disturbed the stillness around them. Emily listened intently, her face pale but resolute. "They're stealing us," she whispered when Laura finished explaining. "Not just our minds, but who we are." Emily relayed the news to Marcus and Ethan later that night. The group gathered in the dim light of the holding area, their expressions grim. None of them spoke for several minutes, each lost in thought about what it meant to lose themselves completely. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "We can't let them win," he said firmly. "If we fight now, maybe we can stop this before it spreads beyond these walls." Their resolve hardened overnight. Plans for an escape began taking shape, though the details were daunting. The facility was heavily guarded, with cameras covering nearly every inch of space. Even if they managed to break free, they'd need evidence to expose the truth to the outside world. That's where Laura stepped in again. Using her credentials, she accessed the server room and downloaded years' worth of research logs, including video footage of unethical experiments and memos outlining the government's plans for mass implementation of the serum. But secrecy became harder to maintain as tensions rose within the facility. Dr. Hughes grew suspicious of the subjects' newfound cooperation, ordering stricter surveillance and more frequent evaluations. Guards patrolled the halls around the clock, their presence making communication between the resistance members increasingly difficult. Laura tried to buy them time by tampering with equipment, shorting out cameras, disabling locks, but it only delayed the inevitable. Then came the moment that changed everything. During a routine check-in, Emily accidentally dropped the USB drive containing the stolen files. A guard spotted it and called for backup immediately. Panic surged through the group as alarms blared and lockdown protocols activated. Laura raced to the holding area, her heart pounding. "We have to move now," she urged, handing Marcus a makeshift map of the facility she'd drawn from memory. Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Let's finish this." As guards stormed the hallways, the resistance sprang into action. Marcus used his strength to knock down a door blocking their path, while Emily disabled a keypad using instructions Laura had scribbled on a scrap of paper. Together, they pushed forward, dodging patrols and avoiding cameras as best they could. Every step brought them closer to freedom, and farther from the nightmare they'd endured. Though fear lingered in their hearts, they found strength in unity. For the first time since entering the facility, they felt alive, not as experiments, but as human beings willing to risk everything for a chance to reclaim their lives. The escape plan unraveled faster than anyone had anticipated. As the resistance moved through the facility, alarms blared louder with each passing second. Red lights flashed along the corridors, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Guards shouted orders, their boots pounding against the tiled floors as they closed in on the group. Despite their careful preparations, chaos threatened to consume them. Marcus led the way, his broad shoulders shoving open doors and clearing paths for the others. He carried a metal pipe he grabbed from a utility closet, using it to disable any guard who got too close. Behind him, Emily held the map Laura had given them, her hands trembling but steady enough to guide the group. Ethan followed closely, his sharp eyes scanning every corner for threats. Bringing up the rear was Laura, clutching a small bag filled with evidence, files, notes, and recordings that could expose the truth about the serum. They reached a narrow staircase leading to the upper levels of the building. Marcus paused at the base, listening intently. "I hear voices," he whispered. Sure enough, footsteps echoed above them, growing closer. Without hesitation, Marcus stepped forward, gripping his makeshift weapon tightly. "Stay behind me," he ordered. The others obeyed, pressing themselves against the wall as he ascended the stairs. At the top, 2 guards stood blocking the doorway. Before they could react, Marcus swung the pipe with precision. knocking one unconscious and disarming the other. Emily darted past him, grabbing the fallen guard's radio and smashing it against the ground to prevent reinforcements from being called. Ethan pulled the second guard aside, tying him up with strips torn from the man's own uniform. They worked quickly, knowing time was not on their side. Laura glanced back toward the lower level, her stomach tightening as she heard more shouts approaching. "We can't stay here," she urged. "They'll be on us in minutes." The group nodded and pushed forward, heading toward the server room where the final piece of their mission awaited: destroying the main database. Reaching the server room required crossing an open hallway lined with windows, a dangerous stretch exposed to anyone outside. As they crept along the wall, keeping low to avoid detection, a spotlight suddenly swept across the area. Someone had spotted them. Gunfire erupted, shattering the glass and forcing the group to dive for cover. "Go!" Marcus yelled, stepping into the line of fire to draw attention away from the others. Bullets ricocheted off the walls around him, but he didn't flinch. His sacrifice gave the rest of the team precious seconds to reach the server room door. Once inside, Emily locked it behind them, panting heavily. "Marcus is still out there," she cried, panic rising in her voice. "I know," Ethan replied grimly, "but we have to finish this. For all of us." The server room was a maze of humming computers and blinking lights. Laura immediately went to work, plugging the USB drive into the main terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she uploaded a virus designed to erase everything stored in the system. Meanwhile, Ethan and Emily stacked chairs and equipment against the door to slow down anyone trying to break in. Outside, Marcus fought valiantly, taking down several guards before finally succumbing to his injuries. As he collapsed onto the cold floor, blood pooling beneath him, he smiled faintly. He knew his actions hadn't been in vain. They had bought the others enough time to complete their task. Back in the server room, the computer emitted a soft peep, signaling the virus's activation. "It's done," Laura announced, her voice cracking with emotion. Files began disappearing from the screens, irretrievably lost forever. But their victory came at a cost. When they opened the door, they found Marcus lying motionless in the hallway. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she knelt beside him. "He saved us," she whispered. There was no time to mourn. More guards were coming, their shouts echoing closer. Ethan gently pulled Emily to her feet. "He wouldn't want us to stop now," he said firmly. With heavy hearts, the group pressed on, carrying Marcus's memory with them as they made their way toward freedom. Though battered and grief-stricken, they refused to give up. They had uncovered the truth, and nothing, not even death, would silence them now. The group moved swiftly through the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoing softly against the walls. The weight of Marcus's sacrifice hung over them like a shadow, but they pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that turning back was no longer an option. Emily clutched the bag of evidence tightly, her knuckles white from the strain. Ethan kept glancing over his shoulder, his senses on high alert for any sign of pursuit. Laura stayed close behind, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. They reached the final checkpoint before the exit, a heavy steel door guarded by 2 armed men. The guards stood rigid, their weapons trained on the approaching group. "Stop right there," one of them barked, stepping forward to block their path. Ethan raised his hand slowly, signaling the others to do the same. "We're not looking for trouble," he said calmly, though his voice carried a quiet determination. "But we're not going back either." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Laura stepped forward, her heart pounding. She held up the USB drive in her hand. "This has everything. Proof of what you've been doing here," she said, her tone steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "If you let us go, I'll make sure it gets out. If you don't." She let the sentence trail off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. They were loyal to Dr. Hughes and the project, but the thought of being implicated in such a scandal clearly unsettled them. After a long pause, one of the guards lowered his weapon slightly. "You can't win this," he muttered, more to himself than to the group. "Even if you get out, they'll hunt you down." Ethan took a step closer, his eyes locked on the guard. "Maybe, but at least we'll have tried." His words carried a quiet defiance that seemed to resonate. Slowly, reluctantly, the guard stepped aside, allowing the group to pass. As they pushed open the steel door, a rush of cool night air greeted them, carrying with it the faint scent of freedom. Outside, the facility loomed behind them, its harsh lights casting long shadows across the grounds. The group didn't stop to look back. They ran toward the perimeter fence, their movements fueled by adrenaline and desperation. Laura spotted a weak spot where the chain link had been partially cut, likely by someone who had tried, and failed, to escape before. Together, they forced the gap wider, slipping through one by one. Once on the other side, they paused to catch their breath. The forest beyond offered cover, its dense trees providing shelter from prying eyes. Ethan glanced at Emily and Laura, his expression grim but resolute. "We need to keep moving," he said. "They'll be after us soon." As they ventured deeper into the woods, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were fugitives now, hunted by powerful forces determined to silence them. Yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also a spark of hope. For the first time in months, or perhaps years, they felt truly alive. No longer were they pawns in someone else's game. They were fighters, survivors, determined to expose the truth no matter the cost. Hours later, as dawn broke over the horizon, they found a small clearing where they could rest briefly. Exhausted, they collapsed onto the damp ground, their bodies aching from the ordeal. Emily opened the bag and pulled out the files, spreading them across her lap. Among the documents was a handwritten note from Marcus, scribbled hastily during their planning sessions. "Don't let them win. Fight for everyone who can't." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she read the words aloud. Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He believed in us," he said softly, "and we owe it to him to finish what he started." Laura nodded, her resolve strengthening. They had lost so much already, but giving up was never an option. Somewhere out there, beyond the trees and the darkness, was a world that needed to know the truth, and they would stop at nothing to deliver it, even if it meant risking everything all over again. As sunlight filtered through the canopy above, the three survivors rose to their feet, ready to face whatever came next. Their journey was far from over, but together, they knew they stood a chance. The group moved swiftly through the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoing softly against the walls. The weight of Marcus's sacrifice hung over them like a shadow, but they pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that turning back was no longer an option. Emily clutched the bag of evidence tightly, her knuckles white from the strain. Ethan kept glancing over his shoulder, his senses on high alert for any sign of pursuit. Laura stayed close behind, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. They reached the final checkpoint before the exit, a heavy steel door guarded by two armed men. The guards stood rigid, their weapons trained on the approaching group. "Stop right there," one of them barked, stepping forward to block their path. Ethan raised his hand slowly, signaling the others to do the same. "We're not looking for trouble," he said calmly, though his voice carried a quiet determination. "But we're not going back either." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Laura stepped forward, her heart pounding. She held up the USB drive in her hand. "This has everything. Proof of what you've been doing here," she said, her tone steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "If you let us go, I'll make sure it gets out. If you don't," she let the sentence trail off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. They were loyal to Dr. Hughes and the project, but the thought of being implicated in such a scandal clearly unsettled them. After a long pause, one of the guards lowered his weapon slightly. "You can't win this," he muttered, more to himself than to the group. "Even if you get out, they'll hunt you down." Ethan took a step closer, his eyes locked on the guard. "Maybe, but at least we'll have tried." His words carried a quiet defiance that seemed to resonate. Slowly, reluctantly, the guards stepped aside, allowing the group to pass. As they pushed open the steel door, a rush of cool night air greeted them, carrying with it the faint scent of freedom. Outside, the facility loomed behind them, its harsh lights casting long shadows across the grounds. The group didn't stop to look back. They ran toward the perimeter fence, their movements fueled by adrenaline and desperation. Laura spotted a weak spot where the chain link had been partially cut, likely by someone who had tried, and failed, to escape before. Together, they forced the gap wider, slipping through one by one. Once on the other side, they paused to catch their breath. The forest beyond offered cover, its dense trees providing shelter from prying eyes. Ethan glanced at Emily and Laura, his expression grim but resolute. "We need to keep moving," he said. "They'll be after us soon." As they ventured deeper into the woods, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were fugitives now, hunted by powerful forces determined to silence them. Yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also a spark of hope. For the first time in months, or perhaps years, they felt truly alive. No longer were they pawns in someone else's game. They were fighters, survivors, determined to expose the truth no matter the cost. Hours later, as dawn broke over the horizon, they found a small clearing where they could rest briefly. Exhausted, they collapsed onto the damp ground, their bodies aching from the ordeal. Emily opened the bag and pulled out the files, spreading them across her lap. Among the documents was a handwritten note from Marcus, scribbled hastily during their planning sessions. "Don't let them win. Fight for everyone who can't." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she read the words aloud. Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He believed in us," he said softly, "and we owe it to him to finish what he started." Laura nodded, her resolve strengthening. They had lost so much already, but giving up was never an option. Somewhere out there, beyond the trees and the darkness, was a world that needed to know the truth, and they would stop at nothing to deliver it, even if it meant risking everything all over again. As sunlight filtered through the canopy above, the three survivors rose to their feet, ready to face whatever came next. Their journey was far from over, but together, they knew they stood a chance. The sun climbed higher in the sky as Ethan, Emily, and Laura trudged through the dense forest, their bodies weary but their spirits unbroken. Every step felt like a victory, even though they knew the danger was far from over. Behind them, somewhere in the distance, they could hear the faint hum of vehicles, search parties sent to track them down. The facility wasn't going to let them go easily. "We need to split up," Ethan said suddenly, stopping in his tracks. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. "If we stay together, they'll catch all of us at once. But if we separate, at least one of us might make it." Laura shook her head immediately. "No, we're stronger together. If we split up, we lose our best chance of getting the evidence out." She clutched the bag tighter, as if afraid someone might try to take it from her. Emily hesitated, glancing between the two of them. "Ethan's right," she admitted reluctantly. "They'll throw everything they have at us. Staying together makes us an easier target." Her words hung heavy in the air, filling the silence with doubt. After a long pause, Ethan spoke again. "I'll draw them away," he volunteered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm the strongest, and I know how they think. I can lead them off course while you two find a way to safety." "No," Emily protested, her voice cracking. "We've already lost Marcus. I'm not losing anyone else." "You won't," Ethan assured her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't about sacrifice. It's about strategy. Trust me." Laura stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. "If you do this, promise me you'll find a way to meet up with us later. Don't just disappear." "I promise," Ethan replied, though his expression betrayed the uncertainty he felt. He turned to Emily next. "Take care of her," he said, nodding toward Laura. Then, without another word, he grabbed a fallen branch from the ground and began moving in the opposite direction, deliberately snapping twigs and disturbing leaves to leave a clear trail. As Ethan disappeared into the trees, Emily and Laura stood frozen, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading away. It took every ounce of willpower not to follow him. Finally, Emily wiped her eyes and turned to Laura. "We have to keep moving," she said, her voice steadier now. "For Marcus, for Ethan, for everyone." The two women pressed on, sticking close to each other as they navigated the forest. They moved quietly, avoiding open spaces and staying low to minimize their visibility. Hours passed, and the hum of engines grew louder, circling ominously overhead. Helicopters joined the search, their blades slicing through the quiet morning air. Emily spotted a shallow ditch partially hidden by thick bushes and motioned for Laura to follow her. They crawled inside, pulling branches over themselves to blend into the surroundings. From their hiding spot, they watched as a helicopter hovered nearby, its spotlight scanning the area. Soldiers rappelled down, fanning out in teams to comb the woods. Emily held her breath, clutching the bag of evidence so tightly her fingers ached. Beside her, Laura whispered a silent prayer, hoping Ethan had succeeded in drawing them away. When the soldiers finally moved on, Emily exhaled sharply, her body trembling with relief. "That was too close," she murmured. "They'll be back," Laura warned, her voice barely audible. "We need to get out of here before nightfall." As they continued their journey, the weight of Ethan's absence loomed heavily over them. Yet with each step, they reminded themselves why they were doing this, not just for themselves, but for everyone who had suffered under the Serum's control. They carried not only the evidence, but also the hope that the truth would set others free. Somewhere deep in the forest, Ethan fought his own battle, leading the hunters farther and farther from the women. He didn't know if he'd survive, but he didn't care. All that mattered was giving Emily and Laura a fighting chance. And as he ran, dodging bullets and leaping over fallen logs, he smiled grimly. For the first time in months, he felt truly alive and truly free. Ethan's plan worked better than he had hoped. The soldiers chasing him were relentless, their shouts and crashing footsteps echoing through the forest as they followed his trail. He led them in circles, doubling back on his path and using every trick he could think of to throw them off balance. By nightfall, he was exhausted, his body aching from hours of running and hiding. But he knew he couldn't stop. Not yet. Meanwhile, Emily and Laura reached the edge of the forest, where the trees gave way to rolling fields dotted with abandoned farmhouses. They moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they searched for shelter. Spotting a small barn in the distance, Emily gestured toward it, and the two women hurried inside. The air smelled of hay and dust, but it was dry and warm, enough to give them a moment of respite. Laura collapsed onto a pile of straw, her legs trembling from the long journey. "We need to figure out our next move," she said, pulling the bag of evidence closer to her chest. "If we stay here too long, they'll find us." Emily nodded, scanning the barn for anything useful. Her eyes landed on an old truck parked in the corner, its tires flat but otherwise intact. "What about that?" she asked, pointing to the vehicle. "If we can get it working, we might be able to put some real distance between us and them." Laura hesitated, then nodded. "It's worth a try." She rummaged through the bag and pulled out a set of tools she'd grabbed during their escape, a last-minute decision that now seemed like a stroke of luck. Together, they worked tirelessly, checking the engine and patching up leaks. Hours later, the truck roared to life, sputtering at first, but eventually settling into a steady hum. "We did it," Emily whispered, a smile breaking across her face despite everything. But their celebration was short-lived. Outside, headlights pierced the darkness as multiple vehicles approached the barn. Soldiers spilled out, their weapons drawn, surrounding the building. "Come out with your hands up," one of them shouted, his voice cutting through the night. Laura and Emily exchanged a glance, panic rising in their chests. There was no way out this time. As the soldiers closed in, Emily suddenly remembered something Ethan had told her during their planning sessions. Sometimes you have to fight dirty to win. She grabbed a lantern from a nearby shelf and hurled it toward the barn door just as the soldiers tried to break in. The glass shattered, spilling oil onto the ground and igniting a small fire. Chaos erupted as the soldiers scrambled to avoid the flames, giving Emily and Laura the opening they needed. They bolted for the truck, jumping inside as bullets whizzed past them. "Go! Go!" Emily screamed, gripping the dashboard as Laura slammed the accelerator to the floor. The truck lurched forward, plowing through the makeshift barricade the soldiers had set up. Behind them, shouts and gunfire filled the air, but they didn't look back. They drove straight into the night, leaving the burning barn, and their pursuers far behind. Hours later, they finally stopped at a secluded gas station miles away from the facility. Exhausted but alive, they sat in silence, listening to the hum of the engine cool down. Emily opened the bag and carefully examined the files, ensuring none had been damaged during the escape. "We made it this far," she said softly, more to herself than to Laura. "Now we just need to make sure the world sees what's inside." Laura nodded, her mind racing with thoughts of what came next. Somewhere out there, Ethan was still fighting. Or maybe he wasn't. Either way, they owed it to him, to Marcus, and to everyone else who had suffered under the Serum to finish what they started. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emily and Laura climbed back into the truck and drove onward. They didn't know where they were headed or what dangers lay ahead, but they knew one thing for certain. They weren't giving up. Not now. Not ever. Weeks turned into months as Emily and Laura navigated life on the run. They stayed off the grid, moving from one safe house to another, always careful to avoid drawing attention. The bag of evidence was their constant companion, a reminder of the heavy responsibility they carried. Every night, they worked tirelessly to piece together the files, organizing them into a format that could be shared with the world. It wasn't easy. Some documents were damaged, others encrypted, but they refused to give up. Their breakthrough came when they reached out to an old friend of Laura's, a journalist named Daniel who had always been skeptical of government experiments. Meeting in secret at a remote cabin, they handed him a flash drive containing everything they had gathered. Daniel listened intently as they explained the Serum, the facility, and the horrors they had witnessed. His face grew pale, but his resolve hardened. "This is bigger than anything I've ever covered," he said. "If what you're saying is true, it'll change everything." True to his word, Daniel began releasing the story in stages, carefully leaking information to trusted outlets while avoiding detection. At first, the public dismissed it as conspiracy theories or exaggerated claims. But as more evidence surfaced, videos of unethical experiments, memos detailing mass implementation plans, testimonies from former staff, the truth became impossible to ignore. Protests erupted worldwide, demanding accountability for those involved in the project. Back at the facility, Dr. Alan Hughes faced mounting pressure. Investigations uncovered years of misconduct, leading to arrests and trials. The once proud scientist now sat in a cold interrogation room, his confident demeanor replaced by fear and regret. He tried to justify his actions, claiming they were for the greater good, but no one listened. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. Ethan, meanwhile, remained missing. Though rumors circulated about sightings of a lone man sabotaging research labs tied to the Serum, no one could confirm his identity. Some believed he had died during his escape. Others hoped he was still out there, continuing the fight in his own way. Emily and Laura often thought about him, wondering if he would ever resurface. Regardless, they knew he had played a crucial role in their survival and in exposing the truth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily and Laura stood on a hill overlooking the city bathed in golden light. News broadcasts blared from nearby homes, reporting updates on the scandal. People gathered in streets and squares, holding signs and chanting slogans, For the first time in a long while, Emily smiled. "We did it," she said softly. "All those sacrifices, they weren't in vain." Laura nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "But this isn't the end," she replied. "There are probably other projects like this, other places where people are being used as experiments. We can't stop fighting until we expose them all." As they walked back to their car, the weight of their journey settled over them. Not just the pain and loss, but also the hope and determination that had carried them through. They didn't know what the future held, but they were ready to face it, to continue standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Somewhere far away, Ethan watched the news on a borrowed television in a quiet diner. His face remained calm, but his eyes reflected a mix of pride and sorrow. The battle was far from over, but for now, humanity had taken a step toward reclaiming its soul. And that, he realized, was worth every sacrifice.